Welcome to the Run Out. I am Neil Barrett. That is Brandon Hooten. We are here to talk everything lacrosse this week. It was a pretty big week, but before we get into all of that, Brandon, how was weekend two of your move?
Oh man, I hardly did any moving. I was very busy with shot an event. Was at the Chalk Art Festival, which is like a yearly thing we do here. So shot a little bit of that for fun as well. And then by the time I got home, I was not trying to move everything. So still got just stuff just scattered, but you know, my girlfriend's holding it down, which is nice. So
I like it. Gotcha. Well, I had some of my plans upended. I don't think my wife will mind telling me telling this, but she quit her job Friday, somewhat unexpectedly. It's been coming, but it was not planned for Friday, so I had to play a lot of catch up on lacrosse because we went out and kind of celebrated and everything. So I've been kind of catching up all weekend, or trying to. So, but yeah, it's been rainy and wet and gross out here and not fun. So,
yeah.
With that being said, let's get into the lacrosse. We will start with the news that happened. We'll basically start with where we were. We'll pick up right where we were when we ended last week, and about 30 minutes after we stopped recording, the news dropped that Jared Bernhardt had signed with the Outlaws.
There we go.
And yeah, and unfortunately, that, like I said, that dropped right after we finished recording. So we'll leave the live reaction to Brian and the Stick Talk boys over there. But in a way, I'm kind of a little bit glad that we didn't. Not glad. Maybe that glad is not the right word, because it would have been fun to like kind of live react. But I'm kind of glad that our first reaction is nothing anyone can hold against us, and we'll have actually gotten to see it. What were your thoughts? You're a Denver guy. You're an Outlaws. Would you say you're an Outlaws fan? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're not quite at that same caliber yet of like Mammoth or Broncos, whatever, but they're getting there.
Yeah. So, okay, as the Outlaws fan on this show, what were your thoughts initially?
I mean, I like it. It's exciting. It's a flashy name. So that was kind of my first thought. Like when I was walking through a store and saw that news drop from Dan Aresti, and I was like, freaking out for a second. And then I had to kind of calm down and realize that like he hasn't played in 4 years. So I had to temper my expectations quite a bit, and I think generally speaking, at least speaking to a bunch of you guys, like we're all on the same page about that. Granted, I also said that I thought he'd have 2 points in game one, and we saw how that went. And we'll get into that more later, but overall I thought he played, for not having a point in week one, I thought he played pretty well. Like he didn't look like he took 4 years off. He looked like maybe he was coming off of an injury or something along those lines, and then was, thrust back into the starting lineup. But obviously then when the subsequent news came after that Eric Law got released, that was a bit of a letdown just compared to who else could have been dropped. But obviously we know what happened with that now.
Yeah, the Eric Law being dropped was like, oh, wow. But yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I thought he looked explosive. His stick skills were, pretty much on par. Like you said, it felt like a guy who had missed a couple of weeks, not a guy who had missed 4 years.
Yeah. I mean, he was blowing by guys a few times in a row that I was like, okay.
Yeah. That was a big thing, because there were questions about his health, about, why he had retired from football, and maybe he wasn't going to be 100%, but he looked great in that aspect. He looked healthy. He looked fast. He looked certainly in shape. Like you said, I think there was that whole discussion. Oh, is he going to have the over under of 2.5 points? And my thought was, I didn't know that he'd have 0. Like I wasn't going to suggest that, but I thought it's not just a 4-year gap the thing that I think people weren't talking about enough was it's not just that he was out of the game for 4 years, it's that he was out of the game for 4 years and is making a jump in the level of play. So even without that gap, I mean, making the jump from NCAA to the PLL can be difficult anyway. Not that this current rookie class is showing that in any way whatsoever, but we'll get into them maybe a little bit later. But like you said, I thought he looked good, and I thought he looked like, okay, this guy is going to be, it's going to take maybe a couple of weeks, maybe even kind of through the rest of the season for him to like really get up to speed. But certainly by this time next year, you'd expect him to be every bit as good as the name Jared Bernhardt like kind of commands. So the next question I had for you was what you kind of are predicting. I have to assume he's going to stay coming out of the box for at least a little while until he kind of gets up to speed. Like we said, he has all the things that can't improve, but he's still got to get up to speed a little bit, I think, with the PLL speed and stuff. I'm wondering, kind of once he reaches that level, where do you see his position being on this team? There's been a lot of discussion about moving Brennan O'Neill into the midfield. I'm wondering what you think kind of the fix for the especially the four Tewaaraton guys who all kind of typically play in an attack position.
That's funny you asked that, because I was talking with the Rough Riders literally like an hour ago about this exact thing. Because with Eric Law coming back and the offense seemingly not being as good as it should be on paper, it throws a wrench into things, because now does Eric Law come play X? Does Pat get bumped? Does B.O. go play midfield? Does Jared now come play attack? Like, I don't really know where he'll end up. I think ultimately at some point during the year he will play a game or two at attack, especially if they continue to struggle like they have. Because I'm sure at some point Sudan's just going to say, sorry, we're going to mix it up and rotate until we find a good midfield and attack line. I would say for this year he probably stays at midi most of the year, though. And then if he's productive, I would say he stays there next year as well. That's assuming that he is, playing well. If he's not playing well, then maybe next year we see week one and they're like, hey, we're going to mix this up. B.O., you go to the box. Wiz, go you out of the box. Like, something along those lines. But I don't envy Coach Sudan right now trying to figure out who plays where. And I can't imagine a world where Pat Cav gets bumped. B.O. obviously is not getting bumped. Maybe Wiz. I don't know. It's a tough one.
Yeah, I'm a little torn because I think I understand the draw to put Jared Bernhardt below at attack, and maybe that's what works best. My thing is, I don't think I want Brennan O'Neill coming out of the box. I want him on the field. That first goal in the game that we'll get to in a little bit, that first goal is because he's on the field. I know it looked like a midfield goal, a goal that a midfielder would score, because he's basically charging from the midfield line and rips it just inside the 2-point line on a straight line dodge. But that was on a ball that came across the midfield line, and he scooped because he was playing attack and he was there. He's the guy that, like, I just feel like I want him on the field at all times. I want the ball coming through his stick as often as it can. I know like the Archers, obviously Grant Ament and Tom Schreiber running out of the box, and they're pretty heavily used, but I just feel like Brennan O'Neill is one of those dudes that needs the ball in his stick. He needs to get touches. He needs to feel like he's part of the offense and kind of get going. And while you can do that from the midfield, I think you really have to like game plan for that. Like you have to say you're the Archers, and you have to say, get the ball to Tom and let him kind of start the play. And I don't know that that's going to happen as well on a team with three other Thwaraton winners lining up at the attack. Wiz, I think, is interesting, especially because I think Jared Bernhardt's kind of more natural position is at X, and Wiz's more natural position is where Brennan O'Neill plays.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's the tough part. Is I can at least understand the argument that maybe it's not best for Brennan O'Neill to move to midfield, but it might be best for everyone else for him to move to midfield, because other guys get into. He's probably the guy that can play midfield better, although I would like to see what Logan Wisnauskas can do out of that position, especially because, you know, if he's going to end up in that low slot position anyway, because Brennan can kind of drag. Part of what I think makes Brennan O'Neill so good as an attackman, even though he likes to dodge from midfield positions, is that he's pulling a defender into positions they're not comfortable with. I think that's part of what makes him so effective, and part of why you would keep him on attack. That
was part of my argument as well. Was Brennan? I'm a believer in that Brennan can score whenever he wants to.
Mm-hmm.
So if he's at attack and he if this is the mindset he has to get in, is I have the ball on my stick, I'm gonna go score. If he does that, then him being an attack makes the most sense.
Mm-hmm.
But and the other pushback I got on this, funny enough, was that you can't run Wiz out of the box because he's coming off of an injury, and who knows if he can sustain running out of the box. Which to me is not a good enough reason to not give it a shot.
No, and also I understand that there's. You know what? I take that back. I don't even understand that. Like, you have to go hard no matter where you are on the field. Like, the idea that he's going to be more prone to an injury by coming out of the box. Most of the time when you come on the box, it's not like you come on the field and you just immediately full sprint to the front of the cage every single time. A lot of times you're just walking onto the field because they're just kind of simply exchanging it. So the idea that you're going to get more or less hurt running out of midfield, I don't know that I would necessarily agree with that. So yeah, no, that was there's been a lot of discussion about what's best, and especially as an Outlaws fan, I kind of wanted to see your opinion. We tend to be on the same page on these kinds of things, but you never know. There could be something there.
It is interesting though, the point you brought up, just real quick, to consider moving BO to MIDI, what that does for everyone else. That's not something I explicitly thought about.
Yeah,
but that is something to maybe look at in the coming weeks. Just seeing if they do end up moving him, does that open up Logan's, Wisnauskas' shooting lanes and things of that nature, and does that open up things for Jared coming back into the fold? And like, that's something interesting we should keep an eye on, probably.
Well, it was one of the things that I thought about. I always kind of think of the idea of moving Brennan O'Neill to the midfield in terms of what's best for him, and I don't think that that's what's best for him. But I got to thinking about it because someone brought up the connection that Logan Wisnauskas and Jared Bernhardt have from having played together at Maryland, and just kind of having similar lingo and probably seeing the game similarly and stuff, and having played off of each other for so long that I was like, I can understand the argument that combo might be better for the Outlaws overall than getting Brennan O'Neill to his best position. So I don't know that I agree, but I can at least understand the idea of like, okay, we're doing what's best for the Outlaws. And I don't know that in the last year and a half, 2 years, that the Outlaws have really made those kinds of decisions. This is the best decision for the Outlaws. I think they have often made a lot of this is the best decision for the player in question kind of moves. So what's interesting to me is that I think almost unquestionably Pat Cavanaugh is of the four. I don't want to say he's the worst, because that sounds like I'm hating on him. of those four, he is the lesser. That doesn't really sound better, does it? But I don't think that there's a question there that you think he's the guy that you most probably want to move somewhere else, and also the guy that is least likely to be moved. I can't imagine they put Jared Bernhardt out there, right?
Not if they're moving Pat Cav. I mean, wasn't that part of the reason he requested a trade from Boston anyway? Was he wanted to play attack? So
I think there were lots of reasons why, but yeah, that was part of it.
If he talked to Sudan about that before the season, why would Sudan then come in and be like, "Well, you know what? Sorry, bud, you got to go play me." Like, that's stupid, you know.
But again, that goes back to what's the best decision for the Outlaws? Is it keeping Pat Cavanaugh at attack just because, you know, we've recruited him and told him he could play attack? Like, you know, we just signed Jared Bernhardt and sat Eric Law. Like, I'm sure Eric Law wants to play attack too. So, you know, I don't know. It's more of that kind of like goofiness of like, and part of maybe why ultimately this kind of super team construction is not, because right now, well, not right now, but at the time of signing Jared Bernhardt, there were five attackmen there between Eric Law, Brennan O'Neill, Logan Wisnauskas, Jared Bernhardt, and Pat Cavanaugh. There are five like bona fide starting attackmen for pretty much every team in the league. So, you know, how do you do that? And then of course you look at their midfield and it's terrible. It's terrible. And it's like, you know, you kind of sold out your soul for these attackmen and didn't build a balanced roster. You didn't do what was best for the Outlaws. One kind of the next kind of conversation about this is Dan Arestia wrote a great article for US Lacrosse Mag this week, kind of detailing all of the kind of inner workings of how this went down. And there were several really, really interesting points that came out that were not common knowledge to most people. As far as I'm aware, even people like Dan, who are like very, very connected, were surprised to learn some of these things. Most notably that unannounced, the salary cap went up last year. The amount that it went up was not disclosed, but it was disclosed that it went up. And also that the PLL, when they did that, they simultaneously also instituted a flex cap that works somewhat kind of like the luxury tax in the NBA. It is not the luxury tax, not the same, but the general kind of idea of there's a little bit of space to go over the existing kind of hard salary cap number that had been somewhere around $780,000. I don't remember the exact number, but has obviously gone up as of last year. And so that was a really interesting thing. And there was a lot of talk about what this could mean for the future of PLL contracts and how they work out. I don't know that there's really a question to ask you, or other than, you know, just thoughts, having read Dan's article, if you got the chance to. So again, I don't know that there's necessarily a question. I just thought it was really, really interesting. Some of the things that came out about the details on how it worked and how teams could put together different kind of packages for him and structured deals that would increase more kind of traditional sport deals that up until as far as I'm aware, up until this deal had not really been part of lacrosse contracts necessarily. So there was some really interesting stuff, especially as we are constantly talking online about the growth of the PLL, whether it's growing, whether it's losing money or not. I know a lot of people like to say that it's just burning cash, and you know, the details of their financials are not known. But yeah, I don't know. I don't, like I said, I don't know that there's a question to ask you other than maybe, thoughts, but I may not really have any because there's not a lot to discuss, just a lot of like really interesting details.
No, I think the only thing is just that this is going to most likely lead to more transparency, I'd have to believe, with
I'd hope so.
Contracts. I won't say salaries because I don't think we're close to them being like, oh, they signed a this amount contract. I do think at some point it'll be more of a this is how much cap a team has coming into the year. This is, like the luxury tax scenario, like you mentioned, like this is how much that flex cap, I think they called it, how much they're into that type of deal. So I do think we're getting to that point as a league. To me, it was more so surprising to hear that some of the guys took pay cuts to make this happen. I'm not saying that there aren't players making a good wage here, but that was surprising just to hear some of the numbers I've heard that players are making, for them to be like, yeah, we'll also take a pay cut in order to make this happen, for a guy who, again, has been out of the sport for 4 years. Granted, if it's not Jared Bernhardt, they're probably not doing that.
Yeah.
So,
and I will say, the article talks about pay cuts, but it also seemed to indicate that most of the pay cuts were really more restructuring, where guys were getting ultimately it sounded like they were not getting less money, they were just getting it differently. They were getting marketing money or some of the flex cap space or different. They were recouping money in other ways. So while I'd imagine that somebody somewhere probably took some kind of a legitimate pay cut, it did sound to me, at least, that some of those pay cuts were more like, yeah, my salary was cut, but the money I'm actually going to take home wasn't really affected. Maybe a little bit or something, but I'd also
which is where that transparency is going to come into play.
Yeah.
Sooner rather than later, just because at some point it's going to be like, you can't just say, well, I'm making this much money, and then it's like, well, because if they start reporting contracts, you're going to have to put that in there that, oh, hey, this is actually an endorsement or whatever, So I'm ignorant to how that works in the PLL, so I can't speak to that fully, but it was definitely just interesting to see the whole thing go down, because he was the first premier free agent that we've seen. I mean, to my knowledge, at least, in the PLL. So it was kind of fun to see how it like went from, 6 teams or whatever it was down to like, okay, this final 2, they're kind of in an arms race trying to put together packages for them. So that was pretty cool to see. But yeah,
no, it was definitely interesting, and there was that 48-ish hours where it was like it felt like a big NFL or NBA kind of free agency thing, at least inside the world of lacrosse. I'm sure few people outside of the sport really batted an eye, but at least inside of lacrosse, it definitely had that kind of vibe and feel about it. So I liked your idea about transparency in terms of like cap space and stuff. Like it would be good to know next year, when the Carolina Chaos are coming into the draft and stuff like that, about like what kind of cap space they're looking at. It even like you said, if it's not like an exact, they have down to the last dollar, but at least if we knew like, hey, they've got. Now, of course, the hard part is, say they had $60,000 in their cap. Like, what does that mean? How much? That's another thing of like transparency, where we don't really know what that means. How valuable is that? Obviously, if the Chaos have 60 and the Redwoods have 80, like, okay, they have a little bit more, but what does that really mean in terms of like cap space? So
yeah,
I don't know.
But I think it'd be interesting also to follow. Like the NFL, every team has this much cap space for their rookies that they draft. I would love to know, like, okay, PLL, you have 3 or 4 picks generally in a draft. What are you setting aside for that versus like, okay, we have these stars. Maybe there's a tier system. This type of thing is always interesting.
Yeah, there is a rookie pay scale, and there is like a max that they can make and stuff. So in that at least in terms of that, like if you did know, okay, we've got $60,000 cap space, we know we're going to sign these guys and they're going to fall under this bracket. This is how much we'd have after, whatever. But yeah, all things like that are going to be really interesting to see as the league continues to like evolve and develop and stuff. I think people tend to forget that this is only year 7 of the PLL. Like there's still a lot of growth and stuff that's going to hopefully happen, if the game keeps going the way that it's going. But let's move on to the games in Charlotte this weekend. Before we get into the games, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on this updated schedule. We've gone through 2 weekends of it now. Specifically, the big one is that gap. So far, the first 2 weeks, and I believe at least Philadelphia this weekend has like an afternoon game on Saturday, like a 1 o'clock game, and then the Saturday night lacrosse game at like 7:30. And there ends up being like a 4-hour gap. And I know in Carolina, and I'm pretty sure in New York last week, that 1 o'clock game was like very low attendance because the hometown team was playing the night game, so people wanted to be at that, and then they didn't want to go to a game. And then like, what are you supposed to do with that 4-hour break? It feels to me like one of the thoughts that the PLL had was, hey, that 1 o'clock game gives us more often than not an actual TV slot, and then we want to institute this Saturday night lacrosse, like kind of get something going, like they called it appointment viewing. Like, okay, every Saturday night at 7:30 we're gonna sit down and watch PLL. But it feels like they didn't quite get there in terms of like laying out the schedule. Especially I noticed it this week with Carolina and the Friday night games, because I have been to that stadium a bunch of times and I know what it's like trying to get to that stadium at 6 o'clock on a Friday night. If for anyone who's not been there, it is right downtown. Traffic is miserable during rush hour, and the roads around it are just 2-lane roads. Like they're very small roads, and it's like one road in and one road out, and it takes forever. The last time I was there for the PLL, I got there like 3 hours early and lines were already like backing up, and it was probably almost halftime before people stopped just like pouring into the gates, like just constantly showing up. So when the Chaos are playing the first game, and it's the game that is going to be the hardest to get to, and then people are leaving, they're not hanging out for the at least not to the very end. I don't know. I know that the PLL has said that Charlotte is one of the best attended weekends, and I don't know if that's in terms of ticket sales or physically people walking through the gates, but I know that that's a thing that I have repeatedly heard from PLL people, is that Charlotte is one of the better attended weekends in the whole season. And then you watched the games this weekend and it did not feel like it. And I don't want to be one of those. I don't want to be one of those Twitter guys that's like, oh, they didn't have anybody there. Like they had plenty of people there, especially at periods. I think late in that first Chaos game, kind of through early parts of that second game, I think there was a pretty solid crowd there, especially when you start talking about people in Bar Down Lounge and people that are just kind of walking around and stuff. I feel like they had a decent crowd, but for large portions of the games on Saturday and kind of the beginning and end of Friday, it didn't look great. And I feel like they're not doing a great job with the schedule.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm going to jump around a bit because I have a few different thoughts. The first is, I understand you have to schedule for where you are, the time slots. But for example, the first game starts at 4 p.m. for me. Well, if I'm working a traditional job, I'm not getting off till 5:30. So I'm already missing that. You do have a team in California that's starting at 3 p.m. So you're already missing out on some viewership there. And I bring that up to say, I don't know why we're not doing a 3-day weekend when you could go one game Friday night, bump that to the, 7 o'clock, 7:30 start, whatever. Then you do the one Saturday night lacrosse, because then you have Friday night and Saturday night lacrosse. Or you can even do 2 games Saturday, and then do one final game Sunday as like a whole, wrap it up. So that's the first thought. Second thought is, I absolutely despise the 1 p.m. time slot on Saturday and then the 7:30, whatever it is. Because they're missing out on 2 things. One is the fans, like you mentioned. If I'm a Carolina Chaos fan, and that's my whole thing, it's not really like everybody else, but just the Chaos, why would I then make the trip there, especially if it's as bad as you're saying, to then have to leave and then deal with that again? You know what I mean? That makes no sense. So that's the first thing they're missing out on with that scheduling. But secondly, they're missing out on a ton of money, of revenue. Because if I'm going there and I know, like Friday night is a great example. If I'm going to that first game, I know that in between games, I can go grab food, I can grab merch, I'm grabbing water, drinks, like all from that. Now, granted, I don't know if they're getting all of that food and alcohol money. So that's, if that's not a thing, then disregard this whole point. But whereas now it's like, if I have to go to one game in the morning and leave, well, now I'm going to go eat with my family at some other place and then come back. Well, now I'm full. I'm not buying any food. Maybe I'll get another drink, but probably not a ton because you already baked in the sun all day to now come back for the one game. It's just, I'm personally not a fan of it. I love the Saturday night lacrosse feeling of like, this is the biggest game of the weekend. But like, I remember when the schedule dropped earlier in the year, like I saw the 3 dates were on the website. It said, I was looking at Denver's weekend and it was like August 1st, 2nd, 3rd. And I was like, oh, they're going to do a 3-day weekend. And then that changed into 1st and 2nd. And I'm like, so now we're cramming Friday nights where people can't get to the stadium in time. And then Saturday, it's like this wide gap that's, I could go on all day about this. I don't like it. I get why they do it, but.
No, I hear you. And to be somewhat fair, I don't know how much the problems of American Legion Memorial in Charlotte extend to most of the other places that they're playing. Like I said, I off the top of my head, I can't think of another stadium that they play in that's downtown and is limited access and you're playing games like right in the middle of rush hour. So I can at least understand that maybe Charlotte is a little bit of a unique case in terms of that, especially that first Friday game. Like you though, I thought why not do one game Friday night, the two games Saturday, and then a game Sunday, or one game Saturday and 2 games Sunday,
or even 3 games on Saturday. Go back to back Saturday.
The only thing I was going to say was exactly that I think there could be maybe some trying to limit costs by not having to rent out the stadium an additional day. But 2 things. One, I don't know. They might be renting it out that Sunday anyway because they got to tear down. That being said, I know there was a soccer game in that stadium. I believe it was Sunday night. Yeah. And I know that field was scrubbed and cleaned out and everything by the time that they actually scrubbed all the PLL lines and repainted the field. So maybe they did get it all out, Saturday night after the game, midnight, 2 o'clock in the morning or something. They didn't have to pay for a second day. And then the one thing against 3 games is it's brutal sitting out there for 4 games, especially those day games. It's brutal. So I understand it is a very fine line to walk, and I don't know that there's necessarily a perfect answer. But it does feel like this year has not been the answer. We could go back to the 2-2 that we've done, and that big gap is huge. It is like you said, it is a big problem. I'm working on building a website at work right now. This is so dumb, but this is how my brain works, just making these connections. And one of the things that we talk about all the time, there are links on our site that take people off of the site. And we're like, you stay on site. You spend your money on our site. We want you here. We're not sending you anywhere else. And all I can think of during that 4-hour break is all these people that are leaving and are just not going to come back. I am a huge lacrosse guy. I'm a huge Duke lacrosse guy. I have been to rained out Duke games that, were rain delayed for several hours, and we ended up leaving to go get food, and we didn't go back.
Yep.
And I am a huge Duke lacrosse guy, and I was like, I'm exhausted now. I'm tired. I'm wet. I've just eaten, but I'm hungry. Like I've got an hour and a half drive back home. Like I'm just gonna go home. Yep. So that's all I can think.
That's the thing too that I forgot to mention is like, you're now making it be a 2 separate planning period thing. Mm-hmm. If you have them back to back, I know for a fact, okay, I'm going to be there for about 4.5, 5 hours. It's a fast game. Like they're not, they're NBA length games. So, but now the way they're doing it, it's like I have to plan, okay, drive time, traffic to get into the stadium, the game, okay, traffic out to get food or go wherever, traffic back in, another, and all of a sudden it's like a 6-hour thing. And especially when you're talking about viewers, like, had they done it at 1 p.m. and, 3:30, 4 p.m., whatever, someone like me could have watched both games. But I could only watch the early game because there was such a big gap. By the time that second game happened, I had plans. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, you're not only missing people live, you're missing people on TV as well.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and the one thing we haven't talked about here, too, is the idea that the PLL often, and I know this is not just a Charlotte thing, often, I'd say almost always, but there are probably some locations where this is not true, almost always schedules weekends around big, large lacrosse tournaments. And the idea is that there are a lot more lacrosse people in the area. But and they've done this since the beginning, and I've always thought it's such a goofy thing because, yes, there are extra lacrosse people in the area, but they're almost all busy.
Yep.
Especially middle of the day on Saturday. They're almost all busy. So you're not actually getting those people to the games. And I've really, really noticed it specifically this year, this weekend, because I'm from the area and I have so many friends in the area who have been at other Charlotte weekends that were specifically like, we cannot make it this year. Like there is big, I don't know what it's called. I want to say it might have been the Big South. I don't know. There's a few tournaments that play in the kind of area throughout the summer, and they were like, yeah, we can't make it. We have 3 games on Saturday. Like we cannot make it. And they were upset. And that was something I heard more than any other year in Charlotte was this year. And how many people said we cannot make it because of lacrosse tournaments. And I think it's one of those things that like sounds really good that we're going to schedule it around this tournament, but then it just ultimately doesn't actually convert people over. So yeah. Anyway, with that being said, let's talk about some actual lacrosse. How about that? Because we've been talking now for almost 40 minutes and we have not talked about one single lacrosse game. So, opening up Friday night, the Carolina Chaos defeated the Denver Outlaws 12-9. The number one storyline coming out of this game was Blaze Riorden. He set the record for saves in a single game with 25. Brennan, what did you think about this game?
I just thought Blaze was unreal and stole the game. Yeah. I mean, there were still some very real problems on the Outlaws side, but like they got 49 shots off.
Yeah.
And Blaze saved 25 of them.
Yeah.
Granted, some of the early ones were like straight into his chest, which I was a bit frustrated with. But outside of those, I was just like there was the double save that he had. I'm like, goalies should not be doing this, and that's back-to-back weeks that a goalie's done that. So it's hard to be mad about that. But like, I was very disappointed with like Brendan O'Neill had the hat trick in the first half, and then just did nothing the second half, which is again part of my gripe with him is like, you're LeBron James of the PLL. You need to get the ball every single time. I know you said you don't think he needs to get the ball every possession. I absolutely believe he should. I do not care what it takes. He needs to touch the ball every single possession.
Yeah.
And if he has a short stick or a smaller guy on him, like, let him go to work. I don't understand the philosophy of like, well, let's just let him go stand over there by himself in space. It's stupid. And then, Jared Bernhardt was generating great shots, but then it was like there'd be points where it was like, okay, Jared's just going to take the ball himself and, try to get himself going. Didn't work. Okay, now he's falling back and like letting everyone else do the same thing. And it was a lot of that like push and pull of like, we're not all working together. It was like, okay, you try. Oh, that didn't work. Okay, Brendan, you try. Okay, well, that didn't work. And none of that works when your goalie has, 7 saves for 36.8 save percentage.
Yeah.
And this is with them winning the faceoff battle again. Like, I'm slowly losing faith in the faceoff. Like, I don't think that matters anymore. Because all these teams are winning it.
That.
Yeah. And I was not sipping that Kool-Aid, but I'm absolutely beginning to, because it's like it does nothing, like, at all.
No, unless you're the Archers the last few years, and you can actually score first possession goals, which most of the teams in the league can.
Yeah.
And to be fair, even the Archers don't do it as well now as they did 2 years ago. Like that was,
their wings
how they ran to that championship. Yes, and we can talk about that. But yes, they have some wing issues. And again, 2 years ago, the year that they first got Sisselberger, that was like a big, huge thing, was how good their wings were. And then they pushed it in transition, and they actually had an offense that could convert those first possession goals. And that's why when I gave you the statistic, I think I gave it to you last week, that they were the one team that scored, or that put up 65% on a faceoff and won. And they did it 3 times, and they were the only team 2 years ago to do it. So yeah, I would agree with you. I think Dan Arestia said something. I'm going to paraphrase here, but he said that the Outlaws offense was an offense of 6 guys standing around waiting for the other one to do it.
Yeah,
and
the entire game, it didn't change not one time.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, Brendan O'Neill had the hat trick in the first half, and it was because he just did it.
He went and took it.
Yeah. And when I say I don't think that Brendan O'Neill needs to touch the ball every single possession, that's true, but also I'm like you. Like, I think on settled possession, like, he needs to at least touch the ball. When you have a slow, settled possession that, where the shot clock runs out and you didn't even get the ball on his half of the field, much less to him, like, that's a problem.
You have to at least look his way.
Right.
Is all I'm saying, because it's ridiculous, especially when he has a hat trick in the first half. He's clearly cooking already. If I understand it a little bit more if he's really off base and he's really struggling and he's making errors, but like he wasn't doing that. And it just got to a point where, like Dan said, it was just like, why are we all just passing and watching? Like, there's no cutting. I don't feel like they're utilizing the play at X all that well, like, overall. I mean, they turned Carolina, 23 turnovers to 12? Like, that should be a game you win 10 times out of 10. Yeah. And so to have this performance in back-to-back weeks from Denver is abysmal. And I can almost certainly say I'm not picking them this week, because what do I have to go off of? Like, they don't do anything. And to lose to Carolina by 3, that's 2 Western Conference games they've lost now, by the way. And Carolina, no disrespect, I don't believe in them in the slightest. So I don't understand how you give up 5 goals to them in the fourth quarter. Like, you have 3 goals from Denver in the first quarter, the second quarter, and then the second half, you have 3 as well. So something is happening in that third quarter that's throwing this entire team off.
It's funny that you say that, because that you don't believe in Carolina, because one of the questions I was going to ask you is, I've seen some power rankings, and they have pretty much everybody has Denver at the bottom.
Rightfully so.
Well, here's my thing, though. I understand, obviously, based on what they've done, which is nothing. Like, I get it. But part of power rankings to me is a little bit of projection. Like, and my question becomes, who do you have more faith in at the end of the year? Do you have...
And that's fair. That's fair.
Because Blaze stood on his head to get Carolina this win. Not everybody has Blaze Riorden in goal.
True.
So like, I'm looking at it and I'm like, you know, I still feel like Carolina is the worst team. Obviously,
on paper, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
So from that standpoint, I can see what you're saying with, like, in the grand scheme of things, if they had to play this game again, I'm probably saying the Outlaws win.
Right.
But the
exactly.
issue with the power rankings right now is they haven't shown any continuity.
No.
And I'm seeing stuff, I believe it was Graham Bundy Jr. at one point. It might have been week 1. I can't fully remember now. But he came over the top, and instead of ripping it lefty, he had to stop to jump to his right hand. And it's one of those things that's like, that type of stuff stops the offense, because now the defender fights over the screen. He's in your face. You can't shoot. Everyone else is watching you. And that's the type of stuff that the Outlaws continually do. And then they come out in the second half, and both weeks, it's been a 1-goal game at half. They come out in the third quarter and they get completely outplayed. So, yeah. And I won't go into Sudan's adjustments, because we've all talked about that on various platforms enough. But
what adjustments?
You said it, not me. That's all I'm saying.
All right, we got Brandon heated.
Sorry.
No, we got Brandon heated.
It was very frustrating to watch. Is all I'll say.
Let's move on to the second game. The Philadelphia Water Dogs beat the Maryland Whip Snakes 16-12. Michael Sowers hopped in a time machine and went back to his Princeton days. Wow. Can't talk. I don't know what's going on. Can't talk. Putting up 7 assists and a goal. I know he was on the record is 8 assists in a game. He was on record watch for a while. We thought we were going to get back-to-back PLL records because he had 7. I think the first goal of the third quarter was his 7th assist. He had almost 2 full quarters to get that the tying and then potentially a record-breaking assist, and didn't end up getting them, although he did grab a goal later in the game. What did you have going on for this game? That was Philly is a little hard because this is the first time we had seen them, and they had been not good last year, but also kind of good. Losing, I think it was 6 games by a goal. So it's not like they were like well off the mark, even though they ended up as the worst team in the league. So yeah, what did you think?
I liked it. I'm pretty high on the Water Dogs this year, admittedly. And I thought Matt DeLuca was awesome. I know coming into the year there was talk about maybe him and Ward splitting time. I'm kind of under like the mindset that DeLuca should just start until he plays bad, because I mean, he had 15 saves, 62.5%. And again, they lost the faceoff battle, but like Michael Sowers was awesome. The statistics, they were pretty close for both teams all around. And they went on huge runs, which I thought was really big for them. Like, I think they had 2 runs of 4 goals. Or I guess one of them was 5 goals. And that type of stuff, when you're stringing that together in your first game, like, that gives me some high hopes. And especially when you're looking at like their roster, they have so many guys. They could rotate guys in if they wanted to that could all be very good. Like, the fact that Thomas McConvey was a healthy scratch last year it's laughable, like hindsight. He's the guy I watch in box, so I'm obviously biased to him. But the fact that he just did not play last year and then comes out and has a great game was incredible. Yeah. So very high on them this year.
I'm borderline wondering if they've got a CJ Kirst issue. because obviously you want CJ Kirst on the field, but do you really want to blow up Michael Sowers, Kieran McCardle, and Jake Taylor, who seem to just perfectly complement each other? Think about, we're talking about the Outlaws earlier. They've got 5 attackmen now with CJ, Michael Sowers, Kieran McCardle, Jake Taylor, and they still have Zed Williams, who won't play this year, but like he's there. Like they've got an issue, but I will say they seem more balanced. They seem like guys that at least somewhat fit together. There's obviously some overlap. I have somewhat jokingly, I want to say, you know what? I'm going to take it back. I'm not even sure it's that much of a joke. I have called DJ Kirst, Kieran McCardle with better PR. I'm dead serious. I think their games are in a lot of ways similar. They're not identical games at all, but in a lot of ways they're very similar. And I think Kieran McCardle goes to Cornell and he probably wins a Tewaaraton and maybe even a national championship as well, and vice versa. I think you put CJ on those St. John's teams that Kieran McCardle was playing on, and he's probably a relatively hyped. I want to say Kieran McCardle was a Tewaaraton finalist. I can't remember for sure, but yeah. So I think he's a relatively hyped kind of guy coming out of a St. John's. So, I was legitimately watching, wondering like, man, when CJ's back towards the end of this year, what are you going to do? You're going to try and make it work? We've seen that happen where, you know, guys get 6, 7, 8 weeks into the season and then you try and switch it up and it just blows everything up. And I half jokingly tweeted out, but it's looking, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, man, I don't know. I might actually do it. I said, you know, when Kieran McCardle had 6 points on 4 goals and 2 assists as on top of what Michael Sowers was doing, I said, so CJ out of the box? Like,
yeah,
you know, I don't know.
It's a good problem to have, but and the problem with that is that it's an issue not just for this season, but for next season. Like you said, when Zed comes back, because we know what he's capable of. We're assuming that Kirst will be great. But now we've seen what these guys are capable of as a unit. Like, someone's got to get benched every week. 2 of them have to get benched. You know what I mean? I don't fully know. And it's funny, they don't even have just that issue on offense. They have the same issue on defense. Like, the fact that Ryland Reese didn't play this week and Jimmy Freehill and Ben Weyer were the 2 they chose was insane. Ben Randall playing a short stick. Like, the fact that they have this issue, I call it an issue. I don't even know what the proper word to describe it as, but for lack of a better term, this issue is hilarious to see unfold because they are so good everywhere. Yeah, no, they, like I said, coming into the season, I was like, I don't know. I know you and the OTB boys are Philly guys, and so you guys know and watch Philly, and you guys were saying that they were going to be pretty good. I want to say Kyle might have picked them to win, although how much of that was real? How much of that was real analyst like behavior, and how much of that was just pure fandom? I'm not sure. It's 1 week because this was their first game, and I'm not totally sold on this Whip Snakes team. So true. I want to be cautious, but they look good. They look good. Yep.
So with that being said, it's hard to talk about this game and not talk about the Whip Snakes and just how rough they were. Emmett Carroll got the start over Brennan Krebs in what I have to assume was just kind of a let's see what we have in the rookie kind of thing. Krebs went 42%, so it's not like he lit the league on fire last week. So I think the idea was kind of like, let's get Carroll in and just see what he can do. Turned out apparently not much. He finished with 10 saves on 39%, so he was a little bit worse. It should, I think, be noted that a decent number of those goals I don't think any goalie is saving. It's not, I don't know that he played super poorly. There are certainly some goals that I'm sure he wants back, but I think most goalies in the league every week are going to want at least one or two back. Blaze had 25 saves, and there were a couple where he looked at his defense and went, "That's on me. That's on me." So there's going to be some that go in that you feel like you shouldn't have. And a lot of the ones that went in, I feel like he shouldn't have had. So it feels a little harsh maybe to judge him off of this performance, but you got to think they're going back to Krebs next week.
I don't know. I was surprised they even started him week 2 anyway, so I really have no read on what their thought process is, if they're going to end up splitting time or if they're just going to keep alternating to see who, I don't know. I do think it's partially in result of just their offense not being well connected, for lack of a better term, of just kind of hey, if we're not scoring or playing well as a unit up there, let's just throw the rook in goal and see if he can, jolt a spark or something. But I mean, I do think he'll end up taking over the starting role if they continue to kind of struggle throughout the year. Because again, like you said, you have nothing to lose, you might as well try. And by my count, I believe it's the second straight game that Rambo's had no points.
Yeah, I think he's over for the season.
Yeah, Pennell 1 point. They have a lot of questions, and I do appreciate Staggs calling out Rambo on the sideline to ESPN when he was like, he's done nothing.
Yeah,
unfortunately, if you're, I know Rambo's on the back end of his career, but if your big name guys aren't even getting an apple here or there, you're going to struggle.
Well, this was my thing. I am not one of the people that thinks that Rob Pennell can't play anymore. He was top 10 in the points on easily the worst team in the league last year. There was I think his next closest teammate was 25th or something. They were way down the line. So I'm not one of those people that's oh, Rob Pennell can't play, he's old and stuff. However, that being said, this specific team went through such an overhaul last year. They got younger, they got faster, they completely changed the way that they played. And I thought, and I said as much on this show, that the RP3 signing made no sense, because you basically took all the progress that you made last year and were like, no, we're going back. And this is hard to say because TJ Malone had 5 points this weekend, but I feel like you set TJ Malone back. I feel like you have set a lot of your other kind of younger guys, your Levi Anderson stuff that were there last year. And then, you drafted guys that fit that mold while still trying to run with RP3 and Rambo and those guys. And you gotta do one or the other. Build a slow, kind of methodical offense built around Rob Pennell and his ability, his vision, his ability to find a pass, and get guys like Will Manny, who you cut, who can be those kind of off-ball finishers, or build this kind of fast-paced, cutting, moving offense, maybe somewhat in the vein of an Archer's style offense, of just this kind of moving, dodging, kind of constant motion offense. But pick a lane, do one or the other. And like you said, it feels like this big crazy disconnect, and it's not working. And it's one of the big reasons why I could not believe when Rob Pennell signed with them, that they wanted him, that he wanted them. It felt like, especially at the time that the deal was made, it felt like Carolina was a way better option for him. Now, now that Roy Colsey has come in, he seems to have an idea of how he wants his offense to play. And I don't know that Rob Pennell would have fit into that either. But at the time that the deal was made, I don't think that we had that, like, plot, formed. So I don't know that that was necessarily a thought. So maybe it wouldn't have worked out either way. But yeah, this offense, it just looks so bad. And really, it was 16-12, but they scored 3 2-pointers, one of which was a fluke. It was a deflected pass that went into the goal. So it was much more lopsided than even the score indicates. They were bad pretty much everywhere. And again, another one, they were 60% on faceoffs. Didn't matter.
Yep.
Didn't matter.
And I'll end with this on the 2-point shots. If I remember correctly, the Water Dogs struggled last year stopping 2-point shots. Mm-hmm. So I'll have to look back at the statistics to verify that, but I'm almost certain they did. So I know the one was a fluke, but to give up 2 others, something to monitor. Because if they're still giving up that many open 2-point shots that are, going in on 2 different goalies, that's going to be an issue. But
yeah.
But no, I'm with you. Like, this could very well have been a 16-6 game.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing before we get off this game, I just wanted to say, I was watching and Aiden Carroll, I was like, man, Brandon might have been on to something there.
I told you.
This dude.
The kid's good.
He looks good. He looks good. He had 2 goals on 3 shots. He shot 67%. Like, and more to the point is, kind of as this season wears on, it feels like like you said, it might be a thing where he starts getting more and more of an opportunity to step in, especially as calls for Rambo and RP3 to sit down and for them to just full on with this youth thing go on. I think he's got a little bit of an uphill battle, and we'll get into that in a minute, but I don't think it was a bad call at all. It's not like you called a dude that's like, oh no, it's like, oh yeah, he could for sure. Yeah. So
he's just gonna have to find a way to get quite a few big point games.
Yep.
Later in the year.
Absolutely. So with that, let's move on to the Utah Archers versus the Boston Cannons. That's the right game. I was like, wait, did I click on the wrong week here? The Utah Archers lost to the Boston Cannons. That's why, because I wrote it the inverse, and I was like, Utah didn't win this week. The Utah Archers lose to the Boston Cannons 9-8 on Marcus Holman's game-winning backhand diving goal with 1.4 seconds left. Probably, without question, the game of the weekend. Even though it was relatively low scoring, such a fun game to watch. The kind of thing that was astronomical to me, like in my head, was that Tom Schreiber had the ball twice in his stick in the last, I think it was maybe minute and a half of that game, and both times it ended up as a turnover, and the Cannons went down and scored on the other end they went from 1 up to 1 down and losing. So that's crazy. That's not something you see often from Tom Schreiber.
Yeah. And I mean, I have nothing to add really. It was just crazy to see, because I thought for sure, like, the Archers got outshot by a mile, but I was like, they're hanging in there. Like, they, they're right there. So then to have Marcus Holman just come and end it with a, less than a second left or whatever it was, is just, it's got to be demoralizing. And I do feel for Tom. I doubt that happens again this year, because he's that good of a player that, it's just not going to happen. But
and to be fair to him, the first turnover, it probably goes down as a turnover on him, but it's one of those, like, the quarterback hits the wide receiver in the hands and he drops it into the defender's arms, and it's like, why do I get the interception here? Like, I did exactly what I was supposed to do, and he fed a guy, it like hit the side of his stick and went off, and it was like, crap. So,
Yeah.
But maybe the lesson there is he was pushing a little bit and shouldn't have fed. It wasn't feeding the crease, but towards the crease, I guess. But yeah, just a backbreaker of a goal, especially I think Dauber had played really well, especially given that he was kind of dragging that leg around for a while. I do find that an interesting kind of story point of his injury and whether or not he's going to be healthy this season. This is the second week in a row, and it seemed to be, I think last week it happened and he kind of limped for a minute, and then I don't think you really noticed it the rest of the week, or the rest of the game. But then this week, it definitely seemed to be bothering him much more. And the good thing I thought while watching was at least we're on this side of the All-Star break, so he'll get a few weeks to kind of rest and heal up. He can pull out of the All-Star game even if he's selected to play in it, which I don't know how he wouldn't be selected to play in it. I think it's pretty much him and Blaze are battling constantly. Last week everyone was like, Dauber's the number one guy, and then Blaze drops a 25 save game, and it's like, well, maybe not. So I don't know why he wouldn't be, but even if he is, he can pull out and rest up and heal up. That was kind of the one good thing, because I think as good as this Archers team is, I think without Dobson it becomes real tough, especially with the Cannons, and it's looking like the Water Dogs right now, and we'll get into them, but the Redwoods as well. Like without Dobson, it's going to be really tough for them. So yeah, I don't like you said, I'm not sure there's a whole lot to really go into. These are two of probably the two top teams in the league, I think. Despite the fact that one of them walked out with a loss, and we'll get to California here in a minute. But for me, these are the two best teams, and they proved it. I mean, it's basically a tie game. Yeah, that could have gone any way. It just happened to be in the right guy's stick at the right time with 1.4 seconds left. So
yep.
Let's move on to the aforementioned Redwoods game. They ran away from the chaos in the third quarter to win 16-10. This was a fairly close game for a while, opposite of the last week's game against the Atlas. Instead of being 4-0 down, the chaos went up 4-0 before the Redwoods went on a 12-1 run. Especially that third quarter, I believe they scored 9 in the third quarter.
Second quarter
was the second. Okay, they just took off and just never really looked back. The thing that kind of seemed to turn the game in my mind was the Blaze Riorden play right at the end of the second half, where he's chasing that ball out and he goes to make a pass and it's deflected, or he makes a bad pass. I don't know. I didn't get a good look of it in the replay. Something happened and he's all the way out at the sideline, and it ends up in Dylan Malloy's stick at the 2-point line, and he has basically an open net to just throw it into. That was right before halftime, and it put the Woods up 4 at half. And that just seemed to really suck the life out of the chaos. And I thought they really came out flat in the third. They didn't look as good as they had in the beginning. And some of that also may have been fatigue. Another part of the scheduling thing that we've talked about is playing 2 games in 24 hours, or just over 24 hours, I guess. That is another reason why I think a 3-day weekend would help. You put the chaos game on Friday night and you put the chaos game on Saturday and give them a little bit of extra time. I don't know how much they looked completely gassed, but it certainly didn't help, at least.
Yeah, I mean, this was a weird one. Like, I was kind of in and out checking the score and whatnot And then at one point I came back and it was just like domination by the Redwoods. And I was like, what is happening right now? And then you go watch some of the highlights and I'm like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. And still, Blaze puts up 15 saves again.
Yep.
So I'm not sure if like that's their mindset defensively. It's just like, let's force them into the shots that Blaze wants, which that's obviously the mindset for every team. But I'm wondering if that's what they want to do all the time, because he continuously has these big save games and he's still saving it at 57 or 54%. You know, so I mean he was incredible. This was, I think, maybe the only game that the team that won the faceoff battle as well. With Rowlett getting killed. I like I texted you, I do think Justin Ignacio is kind of he's ready to go. I think he's going to be seen sooner than later.
A Duke boy.
I mean, I'd be happy if they signed Jake Naso. I don't know if that'll happen, but
well, we heard he was signed, and then that just kind of has not actually happened, which is not the first time that's happened. It's been, you know, reported that someone was signed, and then it's like 2 months later it actually shows up that they've been signed. And I know that some of the Canadian players have had issues with like visas and stuff and getting back and forth across the border. I would have thought Naso, having played in the league before, would have helped, or at least been involved. I don't know if he never actually played in a game, did he?
I don't think so.
He was on a training camp roster, right?
Yeah.
So maybe that's part of the issue there, but whatever it is, whether it's Ignacio, whether it's signing Naso or Farrell or someone else, they've got to do something. This is not good enough from the face-off. As much as I do think that the face-off is devalued in this system, it's clearly an issue for them. Like they can't get dominated like that every single game. You know, losing that way to TD Erlin is not the end of the world, but they do this every single game. And, you know, a couple of possessions won here and there could be the difference for them. So, that was weird. I got to shout out Andrew McAdory. Unfortunately for him, I think he's just, you know, we talk about Aiden Carroll needing the opportunity to play that he's probably going to get. I think Andrew McAdory is going to be like the best runner-up rookie of the year of all time. Like he's just him and Chris Kavanagh are just playing anything you can do, I can do better at this point. And unfortunately for Andrew McAdory, Chris Kavanagh's just doing everything a little bit better. Obviously, the highlight of the weekend was that through the legs goal. And we talked about, you know, Heisman and / Tewaaraton moments. And, you know, assuming that he keeps it up, and I don't see any reason why he won't. I think he's going to run away with Rookie of the Year and just rip it right out of Andrew McAdory's hands, because Andrew McAdory has also been every bit as good as advertised. And it is funny to me that we called last year's rookie class, you know, the best draft ever, and yet this draft, I think, is blowing them out of the water in terms of impact in the first 2 weekends at least.
Yeah, and that was on a bad shooting night for Chris Cav too. Like he shot 18%. And he still had 3 points, and you would never know that he shot 18%. Like, yeah, they've been fun to watch, I can admit. Like,
being an attackman is like being a striker in soccer, where you can run around and do absolutely nothing for 89 minutes, and then you score a goal in the 90th minute, and everyone forgets everything you did.
Yep.
And I think maybe not scoring a goal for an attackman, but you have a hat trick and no one's going to remember what you shot or what it took to get there or how many turnovers you had or any of that stuff. Like, you know, you score a hat trick, especially through the legs and doing these things, no one's going to remember all that stuff.
Especially top corner through the legs. That's what I was impressed with. Like, that's insane.
Yeah. I pulled a hammy just watching that.
Oh, yeah.
Like I don't know how people do the stuff that they do. It would have never entered my mind to do something like that when I was playing. So I don't know.
I'm getting stuffed at the doorstep by Blaze for sure.
100%. To be completely honest, I'm probably throwing it through the midfield line in my attempt. I'm not even getting it on Blaze.
Oh,
but yeah. But that leaves us with the question. We talked a little bit about power rankings. How good are the Woods actually? Because they are 2-0. They have looked good, but they have played arguably the two worst teams in the league. So how good do you think this Woods team is?
I don't know. I was late to jump on like the hype train with them, obviously. So now I'm scared to like go too far the other way because they are playing Utah this week. So I think that'll be like a really good test for them. Mm-hmm. Because I do think playing Chaos's defense, I know they're playing on a back-to-back, but like that's still one of the best defenses, in my opinion, in the league. And the best goalie, in my opinion, in the league as well. Absolutely. So it's not like they like Chaos as a team, sure, we can look at and be like, or not Chaos. No, yes, Chaos. We can look at them and be like, hey, they aren't that great of a team, but offensively, they're putting up numbers against a Hall of Fame goalie. And this is, again, without Westberg sniffing the lineup. I know he's on like PUP or whatever, but, we didn't expect them to be this good. So I think if I had to like put them in a power ranking, I'd maybe go top 4, top 3, maybe. I'm not willing to bump them to 1 or 2 because I do believe that belongs to Utah and Boston. And we've only seen one game of Philly as well, which is tough because I'm high on them this year. So it's, if Philly plays like they did, then I'm putting Philly above California right now. But if Philly comes out next week or this week and, lays a goose egg, then suddenly California jumps them pretty clearly. So I don't know. For sure, top 4, maybe top 3.
Yeah, I think what you said is right. Utah and Boston are 1 and 2. However you want to rank them, I don't think there's an argument for either team at 1, and there's an argument for either team at 2. I think they are cream of the crop, the top 2 teams, and then, like you said, I think you're looking at Water Dogs and Redwoods in those next 2 spots for sure. Like you said, it's only one game for the Water Dogs. But my thing is, I'm like, yeah, but I feel like I value the win over the Whip Snakes more than I value the Redwoods win over the Chaos on the second on the end of a back-to-back. I'm in total agreement with you. They put up 16 on arguably the best goalie in the world right now. My thought would be kind of like you mentioned earlier, how much would their offense being better have caused some balance to come out of that? I'm not saying it would have changed the result or anything, but if they had a couple more guys on that squad and were capable of actually, really running an offense to the best of their abilities, would that have, changed things, brought it at least, within a goal or 2? I don't know, but I hesitate to put them too high, but at the same time, like you said, they look so good, and I don't want to take anything away from them because it's not their fault that they were scheduled against what's clearly the 2 worst teams.
Right.
All they can do is beat the teams in front of them on the field, and they have done that, and they have done it fairly convincingly. So, yeah, I saw someone ask this question. Are they that good, or did they beat the 2 worst teams in the league? And I think it's a little bit of A and a little bit of B. I think it's a little bit of both, and I think that they're in that next tier them and the Water Dogs will kind of shake out over the next couple of games, but they're in that next tier. And I think they are capable, by being in that next tier, I think they're capable of, sneaking up, grabbing one from Utah or Boston and making a final that we would not expect them to, perhaps. I gotta say, after 2 weeks, you gotta picture a Utah-Boston championship game at this point.
Yeah,
I think everyone else you look at has flaws. The Redwoods, maybe flaws aren't apparent, but they have also, like we've talked about, played the two worst teams. So,
yep.
With that being said, let's move on to PLL Week 3. Before we get into the games, right before we got on, a few trades hit the wire. The Outlaws officially traded Sam Handley to the California Redwoods for a third-round pick next year. This will have a domino effect, as it is expected that the free spot cleared up by trading away Sam Handley will be used to bring back Eric Law, which makes our conversation earlier about fitting Jared Bernhardt in even more complex. And maybe you look at putting him at X and bumping both Wiz and Bernhardt up to the midfield line. Maybe that's where they can reestablish that chemistry. Honestly, thinking about that, I literally just thought about that as I was saying it. Thinking about it for half a second, I'm like, oh yeah, that could really balance out that attack line and give you some more firepower in the midfield. That could actually, the more I'm thinking about it, the more I like that.
I like
actually.
that. I like that a lot. It keeps all the attackmen on the field,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I don't know if like the midi room, if we're excluding attackmen, obviously, I don't know if the midi room is all that well put together, like we talked about.
Yep.
So I do think that balances that to then be like, well, hey, everyone can score, like whenever they want, basically. And I mean, then you have what? You have Graham Bundy that you could fill that last spot. You have Dalton Young. I'd probably go Dalton over Graham at this point, but I could see either of them. But that leads me into, it makes sense why they got rid of Sam Handley. Just the room is crowded, and then now if you're talking about bumping attackman back there, like there's no spot for him, unfortunately, and he wasn't great week 1, so
I was a big Sam Handley guy coming out of Penn. I really liked him at Penn, and I thought he was going to do really well. Obviously, that hasn't worked as well as they wanted, but I do think he's capable, and I think he could hit the ground running in California, with Andrew McAdory running as his kind of line mate. It could really work. I've seen so many people talk about Sam Handley shooting and how he's shooting 20%, and I'm like, yeah, but the best midfielders in the league shoot like 25%.
Yeah.
So it's not like he's like miles off. People act like he's Paul Rabel in 2021 shooting 9%. Like, it's not that bad. So I think he's capable. He can come in. I hate to say this, but I think he's going to be an improvement over Romar.
I just think it's tough too out there because their room is so crowded and weird too.
Yeah,
I mean, between the guys playing and the guys that are on the protected roster, like I genuinely don't know how you're gonna pick like who's playing.
When I was watching the game, I kept seeing Nakai sitting on the sidelines in street clothes, and I was just like, what in the world has happened that Nakai Montgomery is sitting there just waiting? And that's a guy that I was like, there are several guys sitting out there that I'm like, Chaos, what are we doing? Go get them. Go get Naso. Go get Nakai. Go get, like, there are several guys out there. I mean, I'd have tried to go get Eric Law, although it does seem like somebody thought somewhere that he was going to come back. So, because I remember
seems like he was just Outlaws or bust, basically.
Yeah,
for him.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. I mean, even when the Jared Bernhardt trade was announced, people were like, "Don't worry, Eric Law is going to come back." So,
yeah,
it seemed like this was kind of the thing from the beginning. So, then the other big trade is literally right before we came on to record. Kevin Brown reported that the Carolina Chaos are trading Jack McDonald, their number 16 pick in whatever that, I guess that's the second round, I think it was, to the Whips in exchange for defenseman Ross Scott. That one feels so weird to me.
Hang on. They traded him for who?
I wrote Ross Scott, the defenseman that the Whips have, whose last name is Scott.
Okay, so I'm sorry. My mind went to Chaos Ross Scott, and I was so confused for a second. Okay,
I think I might have wrote that down wrong.
We're good.
Although maybe they're both named Ross Scott. Hold on, now I'm like questioning everything here. Let's see here.
Scott Smith.
Oh,
Scott Smith.
Yep.
Okay.
I wrote down the wrong name. Yep.
Okay,
Scott
we're good.
Smith.
I was like Scott. I was like Ross Scott just had like 5 points over the weekend. Like, what are we doing? Okay, way better.
Also, we didn't talk about him. Ross Scott has looked great. He's a guy that I think all Carolina Chaos. I'm not going to call myself a fan. Even people who slightly like the Carolina Chaos, I think he's a guy that they're looking at and are like, yo, he needs to play more. We need the ball in his stick more. He needs to be, I don't know. I think he's running a lot of midfield, but he looks like he should be at X. Like, I don't know. Just get the ball in that dude's stick more.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to the actual trade. Jack McDonald for Scott Smith, not Ross Scott. That's one I just don't understand. You just drafted him when you didn't need to. When you had other holes, you didn't need to draft him. And now you're trading him for another pole.
I mean, we talked about it. Like, I don't think they expected Levi Virch to be there, which is why they took Jack McDonald. But still, it's like one of those, like, oh, you're just gonna like give up already. Like, it feels like a deal that they made just to do it, kind of.
Yeah, like what? It feels almost like for like, and I don't know enough about Scott Smith. Clearly, I didn't even know his freaking name. I don't know enough about his game to say that it is a like for like in terms of play style, but it's certainly a defenseman for a defenseman. And it just feels unnecessary. You're two games into the year. Well, I guess 3 games. You're 2 weekends into the year. Have you already seen so much from Jack McDonald that you're like, yeah, move him?
Yep.
I don't know. I just don't get it. And it is not a move that's going to help them on the end of the field. They need the most help.
Yeah.
So
it's a head scratcher.
Anyway, yeah, for sure. Definitely a head scratcher. Anyway, moving forward to the games this weekend in Philly, we got the Cannons taking on the Water Dogs in the first game. It is in Philly. Philly is doing their homecoming weekend. I don't know if we want to do pick'ems or what. This one's going to be really interesting. It's going to be.
I don't know that I can do a full pick'em right now. I'm going to be honest, because I'm so up in the air about like 3 of these games.
Yeah. Well, pick'ems are so funny to me. Like, I enjoy them when people do them, but like me personally, I'm either guessing and I'm right so that I can be like, oh, see, I know everything, or I'm guessing and I'm wrong and everyone's going to be like, see, you're an idiot. And I'm like, what's the point here? We're all guessing. Like, maybe I have slightly more science behind my guessing. Maybe it's more of a swag than a wag, a scientific wild ass guess, but it's still basically a guess. So that's why I'm like, maybe we don't do pick'ems, but this Cannons game is going to be a real litmus test for how good the Water Dogs actually are this year.
Yeah. I mean, really, both those first two games on Friday are. It would not shock me to see Philly come away with a win, assuming that they're as well connected as they were last week. But I do think, like, Boston is just so good overall, and they've played more games, obviously, together. So it's like, does that play a factor? I don't know. I do ultimately think Boston probably pulls away with it, but it would not shock me at all to see Philly come out and play well.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. Like, if gun to my head, forced to make a pick, it's probably the Cannons. But it's such a tight race. Like, if you pick the Water Dogs, I'm not gonna be like, what are you doing? Like, it is. Yeah. It's very tight. And then you talked about it just a second ago. The next game that night is the Redwoods playing the Archers. That's another one that's going to be a litmus test to see just how good the Redwoods are. Can they make it challenging? I think, in my mind, I won't put words in your mouth. In my mind, very similar to that first game. I think where most people would expect the Archers to pull away and win. But how good the Redwoods can play in that game is going to be a really big determining factor. And I think how good people think they are moving forward for sure.
Yeah, and I think this one's going to come down more so to the defensive end for the Redwoods. Just when you look at, like, they're probably going to win the face-off battle just based off wing play alone. Their offense has shown they can score against the best defenses in the league already. So it wouldn't shock me to see them put up goals. But I do wonder, like, how many goals is Brett Dobson stealing? And then how many on the other end is Chase allowing to go by him? Because I struggle to fully commit to Chase just yet. Obviously, it's his first time being the guy, so, you got to give him time. But when you're comparing him to Dauber or to Blaze or one of these guys, like, he's going to have to play exceptional, in my mind, at least to actually come away with a win, not necessarily just to play well.
I'm actually going to go a little bit different than you. Obviously, we're at the same end result. We think the Archers probably win. The key for me, I think, is going to be how good the Redwoods offense is against that Archers defense, because the Archers have put up 8 goals in both games. They won 7-8 and they lost 9-8. The offense, as good as we know it is and can be, has not fully clicked this year so far.
Sure.
So I think it's really going to come down to how good that California Redwoods offense can be against that Archers defense. It could be one of those situations where it could take as few as 10 goals to win, just because of how much the Archers have struggled on the offensive end of the field. I'd imagine it's probably going to take more like 12 to 14, but I'm not going to be wholly surprised next Monday when we sit down to record if the Redwoods won like 10-9 or 10-8 or something. So that's kind of my thing that I'm going to be watching is how good, McAdory and Ryder and Chris Kavanaugh can be against them. It's still crazy to me that they still don't have Sam English in that lineup yet.
Yeah.
He's going to be another guy that just kind of takes them up a level. And of course, now we'll get to see what Sam Handley can do with them as well. Assuming
he can crack that lineup.
Yeah, I'm assuming he's going right into it. Why would you trade for a guy that you're not going to put right in? But we've seen things like that happen, so who knows?
Yeah.
The first game on Saturday is Atlas versus the Whips. This one is probably
Next.
just over it. Just don't even want to talk about it.
No, let's talk about it, but man.
I'd imagine this is I don't know, man. This one's a weird game too. If for like completely opposite reasons. I got no faith in the Whips whatsoever. But the Atlas haven't been impressive either. I think you'd probably expect them to pull it out just because of Heat and Jones and Schellenberger and Matt Trainer and just all the weapons that they have. You'd expect them to pull it out. They're probably gonna they're probably gonna dominate the face-off with Trevor, but I forgot he's gonna be going against Joe Nardella, so scratch that. That'll be fun to watch.
And as we saw at their homecoming, it doesn't matter. Trevor could win all the face-offs. It doesn't matter.
Yes. Yeah. But the other thing is the Whips in goal. It doesn't seem to matter who you put up in there. They're gonna have about 40% and give up 14 goals. So
and the last time we saw Liam Entenmann on the back-to-back game, it wasn't like he played horribly. He made a ton of saves.
Yeah.
So I know his percentage wasn't great, but he made a ton of saves. So it's like getting him a fresh, having the bye week last week, having him have fresh legs under him, like, I'm not concerned, especially with Whip's offense we've seen the last 2 weeks. Like, this is the one game that I'm fairly confident in. Like, if the Whips pull it out and Atlas looks like they did at their homecoming, where they're putting up 10 or 12 goals and losing, by 4 or whatever it is, like, then we can have a conversation about sort of their outlook. Because at that point, it's like, okay, you have the reigning MVP on your team, the best face-off man in the game, one of the hottest goalies. Like, something's got to give. But
yeah, it feels like one of those things where, like, it doesn't really matter how bad the Atlas are because they don't have a goalie. The Whips don't have a goalie, and based on the evidence that we've had so far, their offense is going to be basically non-existent as well.
Yeah.
So all you really have is Joe Nardella in the middle of the field winning face-offs. Like,
unless Nardella's going to go win it to himself and go down and score, they don't have a chance in this one, in my mind. 5
times.
Yeah, he's going to have to do that repeatedly.
Yeah, if Joe Nardella has 5 goals, we might be sitting here Monday talking about the Whips winning.
Yes.
Short of that, I'm not sure it's coming.
No.
So, we'll move on to the last game of the weekend, where the new-look Denver Outlaws will take on the Philadelphia Water Dogs. Again, back-to-back, they are going to play Boston in night 1. You got to imagine this is going to be a good opportunity. Even if the Dogs are a pretty good team, you got to imagine that the Outlaws are looking at this as a get back game. Like, they're gonna get back on the right track with this game, because back-to-backs are hard, and they're gonna hope that they have figured out something in this offense, I think.
Yeah. And honestly, I would assume this is gonna go kind of similar. Let me stop. It's not similar. I was gonna say the face-off dot, I think, will be similar to the Outlaws game last week, where, like, one team wins a couple more face-offs, and that's kind of even. And I think, based on what we've seen from Denver so far, I think they'll play pretty evenly across the board. I just think rest is going to come into a factor for Philly in this one more than anything. If they can power through that, then I might lean that way, just based on what we saw last week from them. And if they beat the Cannons as well, like, are they feeling good about themselves? And the same question for if they drop that game as well, like, because if you lose to the Cannons, at least it's like they're the best team in the league, it's fine. Now you're going to play an 0-2 team, like, you have to win that one. So I could see this one going either way, just like, the first 2 of the weekend, but yeah, it's going to be interesting.
I think if this is the first game of the weekend, you probably almost definitely take the Water Dogs, but the short rest, the Outlaws look to be making some moves to their offensive end. So even if it's nothing more than just like, hey, we can't really, like, prepare for what this offense is going to look like. That could be a detriment. I think it's going to be a really close game. I'm going to assume you're leaning Outlaws.
I don't know.
Fandom
I
aside.
don't know. I don't know. It's just hard because the rest plays a factor in my mind, like quite a bit. And 2 weeks in a row we've seen the home team lose on that second day, I believe. So from that standpoint, it's like, does that trend continue? And but again, I haven't seen anything from the Outlaws that I'm like, that's why they're going to win games. Like,
Yeah.
now, as the week goes on, if they come out and they say, oh, we're bumping this guy to midi and whatever, maybe I'm sitting here in 2 days and being like, actually, they're looking better. So I don't know. I this is like 50-50 for me, almost straight down the middle.
Yeah, and like you said, it has very little to do with the teams themselves. It's like kind of outside factors of like, I don't know. I guess if I had to pick, I'd probably go with the Water Dogs just because I feel like that offense is so balanced. I think DeLuca in goal has been very good. I think their defense is solid. They're fairly good everywhere except for maybe facing off. I don't know ultimately how I feel about Stathicus, although I just look it up and he was actually fairly good.
I think he went like 10 for 25 last week, I believe.
Yeah, I take it back. He was not amazing, but
no. I mean, statistically, but
he was also going against Joe Nardella, so
that's a win, really.
Hard to count too much against him. He did score the first goal of the game, though, which was interesting on a crease dive, which was great. That was super fun.
Maybe the Outlaws can get him at attack. That's we're gonna put out a clip, and it's just gonna be like trade proposition.
That's the key.
And it's gonna be Alex Stathakis to the Outlaws to play attack.
Would you trade Weirman for him? Would it go straight for straight, or would you just go like, you guys can have Pat Kavanaugh or something?
Oh, well, in this hypothetical, I'm not trading Pat Cav.
Why not? Why not?
Hey, I'm a Pat Cav fan. I can't do that to him.
Oh, so there is one on this podcast. Interesting.
I mean, I'm not gonna like ride or die, but I'm a fan of his, and so, but
that's really heavy-handed. I don't hate Pat Kavanaugh. I just think he's slightly overrated. I think he's a good player. I just think he gets a lot of hype that he maybe shouldn't necessarily get. But
fair.
We'll see. With that being said, we will get out of here on this. We got a question from Ben Hilty, who asked, what's worse, Tampa losing on the timeout no goal in the national championship this past 2 weekends ago, I guess it was, however many it was. They lost the Division II national championship on a goal that was taken off the board because of a called timeout, or 2009 Maryland losing in 7 overtimes after scoring in the first overtime, but it being wiped off the board because of a timeout. Very similar situation. I think the pretty obvious answer here is that losing the national championship is always worse than losing a regular season game. That wasn't even that was like a March game. I think the idea was that it's the longest game ever, so you always have that reminder being brought up. So for me, the question I think maybe was put both of them in the national championship or neither of them in the national championship, and what's the worst scenario, like having scored that game winner, but then that was with like 3 seconds left in regulation, and then you still had a face off at the beginning to kind of where you maybe could have won possession. You had an opportunity versus actually scoring what would have ended the game in the first overtime, to then only go 6 more overtimes and lose. And on top of that, it's now the longest game ever, and you're gonna have to be reminded of it like constantly. I think that may be the kind of juxtaposition here. ultimately in his
I
question.
think the way Tampa lost was worse. I don't really care what type of game it is. Like, at least if you go 7 overtimes, I know you scored in the first and it gets wiped off, but like at least you can say like, hey, we went back and forth for what, 2.5 games worth of time. Like we tried, you know what I mean? So it's like whatever, and especially because it's a regular season. But let's just assume it's a natty. Still sucks. But hey, we were so close to that team skill wise that we took them to 7 overtimes, and we even scored in one of the overtimes. You know what I mean? So it's like that type of like whatever. But the way that Tampa scored the goal as the coach is calling timeout, to the, you know, I just can't imagine like that. Like we talked about, I think it was like the first week I was on here, like the high of like we just won to the wait, you did what, coach? And then you lose. Like that to me, that drop is way worse than like a okay, you know, and then we're here in overtimes and then we lose in 7, like whatever. So yeah, the way Tampa lost is way worse in my opinion.
The only thing I'm not sure about, I almost immediately I agree with you. The only thing I'm not quite sure about, there's 2 details that might swing me the other way. The first one is Dave Cottle says he didn't call a timeout. Don't know what happened, but in the game, Dave Cottle's saying, I didn't call a timeout. Don't know what happened, don't know what the refs heard, whatever. This is, 16 years ago, 2009, so it was also in the middle of kind of my dark period where I was stationed in New Mexico in the Air Force, and like I just was out of the game. I wasn't watching it. I didn't see games. So I'm watching like YouTube highlights of this game. All I know is he said he didn't call the timeout. That turns it a little bit. Then what also maybe turns it a little bit too is that in the 7 overtimes, the only shot Virginia had on goal was the game winner in the 7th overtime. Maryland had at least 4 or 5 shots in those overtimes that forced a save out of Adam Gettleman. And so there's an element of like, we should have won, and there was a weird timeout that we don't know what happened there. And then we played better in each overtime period and probably deserved to win.
No, you
whatever
don't.
That means.
No, you don't. Nope.
You deserve to win when you win.
That alone answers the question in my mind. If you have that many more opportunities and you don't put it away, that is on you. You do not deserve to win that game. I don't care if you shot 30 shots on goal in the overtimes and they shot 1. You missed 30 times. Okay? So to you know, maybe it would hurt harder as a player if we're assuming this was in a natty and you're having to play that long and you're like, we had so many chances. But at the end of the day, you're still like, we didn't finish it. Yeah. You know what I mean? And if you leave the door open long enough, like someone's going to come in that door eventually.
Yeah, for sure.
Versus the way Tampa lost was just like, oh, I feel so bad for those, because I don't feel like they did anything wrong. Like,
no.
In fact, they did everything correctly,
essentially,
you know? So it's like, either way, it sucks.
It definitely sucks. Putting both of those in a national championship and losing, like, that sucks.
Oh, I would just hate playing a natty for, 6 hours it's got to take to play 7 overtimes. I can't imagine. And then to lose, not only now are you, like, physically exhausted, but you're also just emotionally exhausted. You're probably mentally exhausted. Like, you're probably seeing that the coach saying, oh, we didn't call a timeout, and now you're mad as a player, like, well, we got screwed out of this goal, But it's a great question, though.
Does it... No, never mind. That's not even a question. I was going to say, would it change your mind at all if the team that you lost to, although I guess it would change it for the other way, so it's an irrelevant question. But would it change your mind if that... Never mind. It's a dumb question. It's a dumb question all around. 100%. Because we were already talking about it being in the national championship. I was thinking Virginia went on to win the national championship that year. I was going to say, like, does that at all lessen it at all that you lost that game to the eventual national champion? But in the scenario we're talking about, it was in the national championship. So, you know, it was a dumb question. I apologize. While we apologize, I wrote something that I forgot to mention when we were talking about the Outlaws. I have to mention earlier this year, I can't remember if it was when you were on or not, I called the Outlaws defense the best 6 in the league. And I have to hold up my hands and say I was decidedly wrong.
So far.
Fair.
We got 8 weeks.
I still feel like when you watch them individually, you're like, yeah, JT Giles Harris is doing JT Giles Harris things. Like, Tarafinko is being Tarafinko. Like, when you watch them individually, I feel good about them, but there's just something about them that just like isn't working at all. And I feel like Geddes hasn't been as good as he was in Carolina. It just like none of it's quite working the way it feels like it should. They feel like they are worse than the sum of their parts. So
I think right now it's mostly just miscommunications. Like there are some goals that like you can tell the like one guy, like there was a play that Mike Manley, I think it was, or maybe it was Jesse Bernhardt, one of the two, thought he was passing off his guy to JT Giles Harris. JT was like, no, I'm still covering this dude. So the offensive player just cut across the crease for an easy goal. And it's like, okay, that type of stuff is where there's a disconnect. Because last year that wasn't happening. So when you add guys like Zach Geddes, on paper, I think I was with you. I'm like, this is a pretty good team. But yeah, hopefully they can do something over the next 8 weeks to not make that take look horrific, but we'll see.
No, it's
looking bad right now.
It's looking pretty bad for sure. All right, with that, we will wrap it up. If you guys enjoyed the show, please like and share and comment and do all of the things. It really does help this show grow, and we're trying to be the #1 lacrosse podcast. I think we gotta uphill.
If you're not
climb.
First or last.
That's
the
right.
Wise words
That's
of Ricky
right.
Bobby.
Nobody remembers second place. I literally just said it. But again, we will get out of here with that. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we will catch you guys next week. And until then, we'll see you in the comment section.